shipping. This version is the TM220A. It has 15 reels here and the tray up front. There's a bigger one, the TM240A. It's about $1,000 more, but it has twice as many reels here. If you're actually trying to use it in a production situation, I think the TM240A is really the minimum. You need those extra reels or you end up swapping reels back and forth all the time. But for my workshop, this was the right model. I don't have a lot more room, so a machine twice as large would just take up too much space. Also, I had to carry this up 2 flights of steep stairs, and I wouldn't have wanted to carry one up that weighs 50% more. So let's start it up, and I'll show you around. That was the startup sequence. I'm sure the audio this week is going to be terrible. It makes quite a racket. It's not a quiet machine. And the pumps that pick up parts, they run all the time, not just when it's pick and placing. So anytime you're programming, anytime you're working with it, anytime it's on, this is what you're going to hear all the time. So on the power up, it does a little self-test. And then we get to the initial menu. These are all the files we can load and pick and place. But let's start off with the settings. It has a touch screen that controls it. So touch there. And first we'll adjust the speed. Going full speed is really fast, and it shakes this table like crazy. After the video, I'm going to move it to the table back there and anchor the table into the wall to give it some stability. But for this demo, I'll just run it at 10%. That way it doesn't shake the table. And also it slows things down enough that we can actually see what's happening in the machine. You can also control things like language here. Value 0 is English, value 1 is Chinese. In order to permanently change any of these settings, you need a passcode to enter into this field that's calculated based on the value here. They gave me my passcode because my machine was in Chinese and I wanted it to be in English. I'm not sure if they do that for everyone. I've heard no. Besides language, there's a lot of settings that calibrate the machine here. This is the manual control menu. The manual menu lets us test out the functions on the machine. So let's bring the head over here to one of these reels. They call the reels the stack, which I kind of like. It's a stack of parts, but I still call the individual ones reels. So let's position the head over here, and I can show you how it pulls the reel out. We'll select the reel we want to use, and then hit locate, and the head zooms right over. And we push the needle button. It positions itself so that the needle hits the holes in the surface mount part tape. We push the needle button to drop the needle down, and then what it does is it grabs onto the tape and yanks it out. That's how it loads new parts. And while it pulls the tape out, these wheels turn and take up any slack in the plastic covering that goes over surface mount parts. We can test that out here. You can see that the ones that aren't connected to anything spin. But the ones connected to the tape, the friction stops them and they only take up the slack. The manual menu also lets us test out the vacuum pickups on both heads, as well as the blowers. I'm not sure what drop does yet. This vise is what holds the board in. It has springs and clamps that help you position it. So we'll slide it open and put a Bus Pirate version 4C PCB in here. Let it slide shut. Now you push the board down to the edge, and that aligns it with a little lip here. Because the machine doesn't have a vision system, it can't locate parts and adjust for problems. If I were actually using a machine in manufacturing, I would almost certainly insist on a vision system after working with this machine for a week. This depends entirely on everything being aligned properly, and that's just not the reality of the situation. If I were doing manufacturing and I had a low budget, I would find someone locally who was selling a pick-and-place machine and willing to train me on it before I took delivery. Even though there's no vision system, not all hope is lost. There's a laser system here that can help you align the pick-and-place head to the board and also to each reel. First I position it to a stack, and then I hit the laser button. You can see a laser light comes on, showing the alignment at the edge of the board and the vise. So I've got the Bus Pirate version 4C PCB in here. I've already used the solder paste dispenser to put paste on all the passive component pads. Now we'll place some of the resistors, capacitors, and other cheap small components. The pick and place runs off of comma separated spreadsheet files stored on an SD card. Since our goal is to use this for prototypes, that means making one-offs of a whole bunch of different boards. We need an easy way to get the pick and place files out of Eagle. So we're working on a user language program, a ULP file, that takes all of the parts on the board, condenses them to a bill of materials, and then lets you assign reels to each one. You'll be able to save profiles, save reels. That way you can load things up, match it up, pick and place it, and be done with it. That workflow is a lot faster than most machines out there, so this could be a very cool thing for one-offs and prototypes. Using the current version of our ULP, we exported the placement file for the Bus Pirate 4 PCB that we've got in here. Put it on this SD card, and now I'll stick it in the front of the machine. Go to the Task menu, and you can see the list of pick and place files we've got on here. We want to do Bus Pirate 1, and we'll hit Load. This shows the parts that will be placed. You can scroll up and down with the touchscreen. It's just a few resistors, a few resistor networks, and a couple voltage regulators. We have two options to start. We can push the big green Start Pause button, then the process starts automatically. The other option is to hit the Step button, which lets us single step through the placement and see how each part is put on the board. Let's do that for this demo. So the first step is the head comes over, the needle drops, and it yanks out the tape enough to expose the next part. This also turned, taking up any slack from the plastic film that covers the tape. We go back, the head drops and picks up the place on head number 1. It has two heads, so it can double the placement speed of parts, but your file has to take that into account and have the logic to do that. We're not quite there yet with our ULP. Eventually though. Next the part's turned. Now it takes it over to the board and places it. And the next step, loads the next part. This is the place board. Not perfect alignment, but enough that the solder paste will carry it into place during a proper reflow process. See, some of the parts like the voltage regulators are placed wrong. That's because the ULP has some kinks in it still. Now I'm going to use a piece of masking tape to lift up and remove all the parts we just placed. It still leaves enough solder paste behind, it should work okay. Now I'll hit the escape button, go back into the settings menu, turn the speed back up to 100%. Now you can watch it work full speed. Pretty sweet, huh? I love that. Obviously the placement on that run was just terrible. I think most of the parts would probably work, but there was so much motion there, parts got tossed all over the place and fell off the solder paste. But with the tables anchored down, it's a lot less advanced than what you might find in a factory. It doesn't have a vision system, so it can't identify where parts are or what their alignment is. It works entirely on coordinates. So if everything's not lined up perfectly, it can't get it to the right place on the board. That's compensated a bit by the solder paste. The surface tension of the solder will move the part and help it align during the reflow process. That's also why it's really important to have the right reflow curve and the right temperature curve during a reflow process so those parts can line up properly and they get all the help they possibly can from the flux and the solder and the surface tension during cooking. Well, that's it for this week. Next week I'll be back with part 2 and show you how